A magnificent view of the port city opened up before the hero. There were multi-masted ships with sails everywhere, and seagulls were circling. There were plenty of merchants offering their services for a reasonable fee. The red-haired young man's eyes lit up at the sight of all this splendor. Suddenly, Ray was called out by his friend Wolf, who was walking behind him. The rest of the team members arrived immediately, also inspired by the sight of the huge city. But this was not surprising, because Theodore said that their new adventure began here. The boys lived in an era of adventure, when adventurers from all over the world created their own adventures and became heroes in their travels. Various terrifying monsters hid through mysterious portals that began to appear all over the world. After passing through this gate, numerous adventurers died. But the search for items of unimaginable value that were behind the gates did not stop. While planning a new adventure, the wolf said they needed bait. After all, they can't plan anything until they know what awaits them beyond the gates. Many adventurers have died because of such surprises, so they need a slave to act as bait. Tara supported Wolf, saying that they needed someone who would attract attention so that they could escape if necessary. With such intentions, the boys came to the slave market, because all the people who were sold here were intended to become bait. The merchant laughed and assured them that they would not regret the purchase, because these slaves were worth their money. He recommended slaves who were in excellent shape and had only recently been received. The wolf agreed to buy them, and now the 4 of them and their 2 slaves were heading towards the gate. Before entering the portal, they left marks to notify others that they had entered, since it seemed that no one had passed through it yet. And this meant that the guys would be the first there. The team walked through the red portal with enthusiasm. Immediately around them, they saw giant glowing mushrooms. Ray said that he had never been to such a mysterious place before, and it was completely different from what he had imagined. But the wolf told him not to be nervous, because the gates were usually located far from the monster's habitat, so they should be safe now. Also, they couldn't exit through the same gate they entered through, so they had to find a way out first. Everyone was calmly walking forward when a terrible monster with a huge number of teeth appeared behind Tara. Everyone was horrified that a monster had appeared here, and besides, it had almost eaten their friend. It turned out that the whole place was teeming with these terrible creatures. Using a bow and fire arrows, the wolf began to strike the monsters. Realizing that their situation was very bad, the man told them to tie the bait to a tree and run away. But the slaves begged the adventurers to take them with them too. They tied the unfortunates to a tree and began to run away, although the slaves begged them not to leave them. But the next second, one of the slaves was bitten to death by a toothy monster. A terrible clawed paw was already reaching out to the second one. The adventurers were able to escape, and the wolf said that it was a failure, and now the cleanup was not important, because it was necessary to quickly find a way out. Theodore told Ray not to lose heart, because if they failed this time, they could always try again. However, the next second, the silhouette of a huge hairy monster appeared behind him. The monster crushed Theodore without any effort, leaving only bloody shreds of him. In a rage, the wolf shot fire arrows at the monster. However, the monster released its sticky tongue and wrapped it around the wolf's neck. Cutting off his oxygen supply, it dragged the man straight into its toothy mouth. The next second, the monster bit the wolf right before Ray's eyes. Now it was the turn of the red-haired guy, who was being approached by a creepy monster. He could no longer run and tried only to crawl, saving his life. Suddenly, one of the slaves they had left by the tree appeared before him. Ray greeted him, saying that he was glad the boy survived and asked him to help him. He also said that all his friends were dead, and only the 2 of them were left. Ray begged for help, but the slave only watched the last seconds of the red-haired guy's life. Suddenly, the guy jumped out of the tree and found himself right in front of the monster. However, it was already too late. The monster had just eaten half of the young man. In his death throes, Ray said that even a slave would not get out of here, because he would be next in line. After these words, he completely disappeared into the monster's toothy mouth. Now the slave was left alone with the hairy monster. The monster immediately began to attack the man, because for him he was another easy prey. However, this young man did not intend to die, and created a magical projectile with his staff that struck the monster. Having destroyed the monster, the guy in the collar said that he would die far from here. Suddenly the action moved to a desert teeming with monsters. The mighty heroes standing on the rock were waiting for the main dragon to fight him. He did not keep them waiting, and the Horntail, the king of dragons, appeared before the warriors. The heroes understood that if this monster was here, it meant that the others who fought with them were already dead, and they were left alone. One of these warriors was Elliot, the last adventurer. Now, together with his team, he tried to confront a huge 3-headed dragon. But after countless attempts to defeat the monster, they failed. Everyone around the young man was killed, and he was already losing his last strength. In front of him, in pools of blood, lay the only severed head of the dragon out of 3. Elliot realized with bitterness that it seemed his end had come. The dragon, meanwhile, had restored its severed head and was preparing to attack the only surviving hero. In despair, Elliot cursed this world, not believing that everything could end like this. After all, if this was the end, then all his friends had given their lives in vain. He refused with all his soul to accept the inevitable defeat. Gathering his remaining strength, he created a magical projectile, saying that he would kill the monster even if it was the last thing he could do. He had already directed the sphere towards the monster, but suddenly his strength completely ran out. Then the dragon released a powerful blast of energy to kill Elliot. His last wish was to start over and be better prepared for this fight. Suddenly he woke up in shackles, sitting on the damp ground of the cell. Right in front of him was a nasty-looking merchant who had just doused him with cold water from a bucket. Suddenly Elliot realized that he was in a slave market. But this was strange, because such markets had been banned long ago. Suddenly the young man recognized the man standing in front of him as the merchant who had bought him at the market 6 years ago. Then he realized that he had indeed gone back in time, to the very day when it all began. The hero's mind told him that it was most likely a dream, but the sensations were too real. It was at this moment that the wolf bought 2 slaves at the market as bait, and Elliot realized that he had been given a second chance. After the battle with the monsters, when all the adventurers who bought it were killed, he began to look for useful items. The guy took the wolf's fire arrow staff, because he definitely didn't need it anymore. He also found a telekinesis ring that one of the warriors had hidden in his boot. Suddenly, turning around, Elliot noticed a huge number of monsters behind him, who had gathered at the smell of blood. They immediately rushed at the warrior, because they still wanted to profit from human flesh. But Elliot, using his staff, easily killed one of them. Then, from the other side, one of the vile monsters released its sticky tongue. In this way, he grabbed Elliot's magic staff and wanted to break it. The monsters surrounding the young man were ready to tear him to pieces. Then, at the last moment, he dodged and shot a fiery arrow at them. With the help of the ring of telekinesis, the hero began to control this arrow and carried out an attack through all the monsters. But Elliot knew he couldn't hold out for long against a whole horde of monsters. After recharging his staff, he released a huge fire arrow, and again passed it through all the monsters, thus hitting most of them. Suddenly, a girl who was still alive spoke up behind him, saying that he did not look like an ordinary slave. She asked Elliot who he was to have this fighting ability and such magic. However, the guy was in no hurry to answer the girl, because she used people as bait in order to survive herself. He said that he despised people like her, and pointed a charged staff at her. Meanwhile, Elliot returned to the city, where everyone around him was amazed that he was the only one left alive after that brutal battle. The guy understood that if he was given a second chance, he needed to act quickly to avoid repeating his failure. But first of all, he needed to get rid of his slave status. Meanwhile, the guild that Elliot was a slave to was discussing the situation that had happened earlier. One of the guards reported to the Lord that only the slave returned unharmed. However, the Lord said that this is not the first time this has happened. But when he learned that everyone else involved in the mission had died, he decided that this was indeed a strange thing. Moreover, this slave returned back instead of running away. Slaves usually didn't do this, because those who became slaves because of huge debts would inevitably become bait again. Another man told the guildmaster that the slave had awakened the first circle, which surprised him greatly. At the same time, this restless slave asked to change his contract in order to register as an adventurer. Besides, the guild owner said to pay special attention to this matter. This greatly surprised the man sitting at the table. He could not understand why the head of the guild was interested in an ordinary slave. It turned out that Elliot's father was the only member of his family, and when he died of illness, the young man became a slave. He took black moss from the Gapor guild to cure his father and promised that he would repay them. But the guild demanded 1 million as payment, which was 3 times the market price of the item. And so the Gapor guild exploited Elliot for 6 years. Now he was going to take revenge on these people. Now he was sitting at the table with Lord Ibis, discussing the change in his contract. The man agreed to register the boy as an F-rank hunter. However, Elliot demanded that he be given the rank of E. The young man argued that hunters should not be judged by their ability to exterminate monsters, since the very first adventurer earned his fame thanks to his survival skills. Thus the main goal of any adventurer was to return alive. Ibis agreed, saying that the information the survivors brought back was more valuable than any combat skill. However, he said that slaves were only taken into low-level dungeons, and that the boy was wrong to think that his clumsy survival skills would help him in the future. To prove his skills to him, Ibis invited the young man to go into the dungeon from which 60 people had not returned. If he survives and comes back, then he will prove that he deserves such a rank. And then the Lord will sign a contract with him, freeing the young man from slavery. However, in reality, The man was sure that the guy would not be able to complete such a task. The next day, Elliot came to meet the team that would go into this dungeon with him. He was greeted by the commander, who was the tank of this team. Everyone in the squad was positive, saying that they didn't care at all that Elliot had been a decoy before. This squad had the goal of returning the items of the 12 groups that died in this dungeon, and once they hand over the artifacts to the trading guild, their task will be completed, and they will be paid dearly. Meanwhile, altogether they had already entered the dungeon. Because of the high probability that their mission would be prolonged, the warriors decided to set up camp. After the preparations were completed, the detachment split into 2 groups to scout the area. They had been walking for quite some time now, but hadn't seen a single monster, let alone lost items. However, Elliot's attention was drawn to some strange marks on the ground. Finding nothing, the groups returned to camp and sat around the fire. After eating, everyone fell asleep, but after some time the entire squad except Elliot got up. It turned out that they had put sleeping pills in his dinner so that he would sleep like a log. They wanted to steal from him the staff of fire arrows, which was worth a whole 10,000 coins. One of the squad members ripped open the bag where he thought Elliot was sleeping. However, to his surprise, he found only a log there. Everyone was surprised, saying that it was impossible, and they immediately began to look for what I was wearing. But suddenly a powerful explosion was heard behind the adventurers. Someone set fire to their camp, which was set up in a tree. It was a huge, vile monster that looked like an eye with lava oozing out of it. The squad leader realized that Elliot was using them as bait to lure this monster. Now the warriors tried to flee, saving their lives. It turned out that Elliot had long since realized that they were trying to deceive him, because they were too kind to the slave. Besides, the young man had a feeling that the monster living here might be similar to this slug. But still, the monster was bigger than he thought. It was a golden slug that was chasing the warriors at great speed. His body was made of acid, so for them, who were close combat warriors, he was the most unpleasant opponent. In addition, this monster could carry out long-range attacks with its acid. The squad tried to escape from the monster, because its acid arrow had to recharge for 1 minute. They were going to regroup and find a good opportunity to attack to get to the core in his head. Suddenly, breaking the plan, one of the warriors headed towards the monster to finish it off faster. However, the captain cried out that they must all attack together in order to carry out a successful attack. The next second, an acid arrow cut the careless warrior in half, and he died. In a rage, the monster began to spit out acid blasts, ignoring the need to recharge its skill. In the end, all that remained of the entire squad were charred skeletons. Now Elliot understood why so many people died from this monster, because by eating objects, it became stronger and stronger. To defeat such a monster, one had to be an adventurer with more than one circle. Besides, it turns out that the slug has long since eaten all the items located here, which means the mission was a failure from the start. Suddenly a fiery arrow flew at the slug's head, but the attack never reached the core in his head. Now the monster attacked Elliot with its acid arrows. However, the hero easily dodged the attacks using the rope. The young man realized that in order to break through the monster's resistance to magic, he had to hit the same place several times. He knew that only he had the strength to do this, and he fired another fire arrow. Meanwhile, Elliot had to dodge acid attacks again. There were still 3 accurate hits left to hit the monster. To maneuver between the fatal shots, the boy used a rope that he tied around his waist. Using his bow, he fired another fiery arrow. Using the ring of telekinesis, the warrior directed it exactly to the right place. So he shot 5 times at the same place, and the scarlet core in the monster's head was revealed to him. Elliot was about to grab him, but the slug's huge paw rose up behind him to grab him. The giant palm was getting closer and closer to the hero, ready to crush him in a death grip. But Elliot managed to throw the blade to the ground as an anchor. With the help of the rope, he made a sharp maneuver to avoid the slug's attack. Having landed on the ground, the guy was ready to immediately attack the monster with a fire arrow. Using telekinesis, he altered the arrow's trajectory so that it would go around the palm he was using to defend himself. And a second later, the arrow pierced the monster's face. There was a powerful explosion, and pieces of the monster flew everywhere. Elliot immediately rushed away from the scene of the explosion, using a blade and a rope. The young man managed to climb a tree before he was washed away by the wave of flames. What was left of the slug was now moving in a huge mass, destroying everything in its path. After everything had settled down, Elliot went to get the core, which was in the head of the golden slug. The next day, the young man sat before Ibis, saying that he had completed his task and returned. The man was surprised, but admitted that the guy could do more than just talk. However, he also noticed that Elliot had returned alone again, and had not brought the items he had been sent for. But the guy only replied that since there were newbies on his team, they died at the hands of the boss, and all the items were eaten by the golden slime. Ibis realized that all the items he had rented had been destroyed, and their guild could not ignore such a financial loss. The problem was that this slave returned from the mission alive. It was not profitable for them to take him into the guild, so the Lord said that he had failed the task. However, Elliot objected, saying that he was not finished yet, and he had a surprise for him. He showed the second adventurer circle on his wrist and said that he ate the golden slug. Ibis was extremely surprised that a simple slave managed to absorb the golden slime's mana stone. Now the young man demanded to be given his freedom and assigned the E rank, as the Lord had promised. Instead, the man said he was giving Elliot a D rank. But Ibis continued, saying that if he worked with him, he would give him a C rank right away. But usually, if a C rank was given to an adventurer who didn't have the third circle, it was considered a biased attitude. The circles had a very strong influence on the adventurer's rank and had a big difference between them. Ibis realized that this was no ordinary slave, so he wanted to get him into his team. Elliot was glad that he was being addressed better faster than he thought. But the man in front of him was still rather impatient. However, the guy himself had to hurry, because the first gate of the red rank, which only 100 people could enter, would soon open. After Elliot signed the contract, he made another request. To his surprise, he asked the man to lend him some money. As soon as the gate appeared, people said that a new era of adventure had begun. In fact, it was a black magician's trap. Many adventurers died in the dungeons, and with them, the future potential of Maple, and then the last day arrived. All the monsters that were buying themselves time poured out of the gate, the people lost. All this was supposed to happen in 3 years. Meanwhile, Elliot decided to stock up on supplies to prepare for the upcoming battle. In the meantime, he came to the slave market to meet someone. The trafficker took him to a punishment prison where those who behaved badly were placed. The merchant was extremely surprised that the buyer needed this particular person. However, Elliot was looking for this particular guy, who was now being kept on a chain as a particularly dangerous criminal. He remembered that before his return, there was an incident in which the death of one person brought the end of the world much closer. This whole situation was somehow connected with this slave, but the guy wasn't going to just go with Elliot, saying he didn't know him. The merchant also opposed this idea, because he considered Debo a complete psycho. But Elliot knew that this man had unique skills comparable to his. The young man asked the slave how much he was worth, to which the slave replied that it was worth 1,000,000 coins, and if he didn't have that money, then he should get lost. To which Elliot pulled a large stack of papers out of his pocket. He offered Debo a 1-year contract, and they would split the profits 7-3. The former slave snatched the contract from Elliot's hands, enthusiastically telling him not to change his mind. He immediately signed the contract, certifying it with his own blood. Now the contract was concluded, and they immediately headed for the gate. Elliot told the guy that he would have to prove he was worth his money. Elliot even bought his new partner a new weapon. However, it was axe, but Debo preferred to fight with a sword. Meanwhile, they entered the red gate with 1 mark and a limit of 8 people. Debo asked where the rest of the squad was, but Elliot just looked at him silently. Then he pushed the guy into the gate, and he was not at all happy, because he found himself with an inconvenient weapon. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a whole army of stumps appeared, heading towards the guys. It was definitely a mistake on Debo's part, as the monsters came running at his scream. These stumps were known for their hard bark, which was difficult to pierce with a sword or spear, and there were a lot of them. But Elliot immediately pierced one of them with a fire arrow. He used telekinesis again, sending the arrow through numerous monsters. The young man said that he was disappointed in Debo, and that he should not make such mistakes again. To somehow make amends, the guy decided to collect the mana stones that fell after defeating the monsters. After that, they, together with Elliot, decided to go further underground. Debo thought at first that this guy was just crazy, but he turned out to be quite a serious warrior. He realized that with such a talented person by his side, he could earn a lot of money for his sister's treatment, and for himself for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, they came across a group of stumps again. Now Debo himself had to kill them all. Elliot was looking at the guy at this time and noticed that he had actually fought with the ball before. However, he knew that it was the axe that would unlock his full potential as a warrior. It was not for nothing that he was the only person whom the heroine with the axe, Oren, chose as her student. During the battle, Debo himself noticed that the axe had a large radius, and it was quite powerful, overall, even more convenient than a sword. Now that he had relaxed, he was able to wield the new weapon even better. Elliot realized that he was right about the guy, because he learned quickly and showed good results. Suddenly, the earth itself shook beneath the heroes. A giant, creepy tree stump emerged from the ground. Elliot saved Debo from the monster's sudden attack, grabbing him with a swift jerk. Now the guy himself decided to fight against the monster, saying that its size is not a problem. After all, now it was even easier to get into it than before. However, Elliot's fire arrow was blocked by one of the giant tree stump's branches. Although his reaction was faster than expected, the young man still did not give up and continued to attack him. He used telekinesis to trick the stump and stab it from behind. However, the monster managed to react, repelling the magic projectile. Elliot realized that magic wouldn't work on the monster, and now he and Debo were running away. However, the stump would not have defended itself if it had been immune to magic, so it turns out the whole problem was in its branches, one of which was now threatening the warriors with a fatal blow. To avoid the attack, Elliot used telekinesis to pull a rock onto which they landed safely on the ground. Right now, he told Debo to take care of the small monsters while he dealt with the huge stump. Without listening to objections, Elliot immediately rushed off to battle the monster. She fired another fire arrow straight into the giant stump's face. Of course, this attack didn't work, and the monster parried it. However, the second arrow, which was quickly lowered, struck the monster right in the eye. Since Elliot already had a second circle of adventurer, he could use magic twice in a row. Thus, he fired 2 fire arrows one after another, and the stump did not have time to react to all the shots. However, Debo noticed that small monsters were approaching Elliot from behind. But the guy wasn't afraid of them, and he defeated them with telekinesis, using a fire arrow. Elliot turned around and looked at Debo, asking why he couldn't even deal with the little ones. The hero was distracted, and in the meantime, the stump was about to carry out his attack. Now his branch passed within the shortest safe distance from the hero's eyes. But the next second, Debo pushed Elliot away from the branch and chopped it with his axe. He told the hero that he had saved him, and therefore he should take back his words about his uselessness. Elliot replied that he was right and said that he was now useful. Now the two of them rushed into an attack against the giant monster. The first one attacked him with a fire arrow, and at that moment Debo struck with his powerful halberd. To defend itself, the tree stump began to attack the warriors in close combat from both sides with its branches. Instantly, the warriors decided among themselves who would destroy which branches. Suddenly, one of the branches hit Debo hard, hitting him on the back. From the pain, he could not stay on his feet and began to fall from a great height straight into the teeth of a giant monster. To save the boy, Elliot picked up the stone from the ground again, but the stump decided to finish off the enemy and chopped the boulder with its branch. Not lagging behind, the stump continued to attack the guy with its sharp branches. Finally, he gathered his strength and dealt a powerful blow to the monster with his axe. He struck the monster in the eye with his axe, but the next second, his strength ran out, and the stump squeezed the handle of Debo's weapon. Using telekinesis, Elliot pulled the axe out of the stump's eye, and he transferred it straight into the guy's hands. He, in turn, cut off the monster's second eye. Stump screamed in pain, and Elliot fired 2 fire arrows straight into the gaping mouth. They reached the core that contained the monster's life force. The monster burned in flames, screaming in pain. Elliot praised Debo for the fight, saying he did a great job. Meanwhile, Debo's sister was already getting ready to go to bed after dinner at this moment, when there was a knock on her door, and her brother appeared on the threshold. She immediately threw herself into his arms, congratulating the guy on his return. Elliot returned to the empty house on the edge of the forest. On the table near the door stood a framed picture of Elliot and his father. The already stiff corpse lay on the bed, foam visible from its mouth. Elliot took one last look at what had once been his father and left. He also decided to burn down the place that used to be his home. Meanwhile, there were problems in the guild where Elliot was now an adventurer. The day of conquering the gates was approaching, but they still could not find people. Another problem was that in the Gold Merchants Union there were 3 sisters whose skills were incredible. Well, in general, the threat was posed by members of all 10 trade groups, and not just the union. He also had a bad feeling about Elliot. Well, he was definitely thinking about sending him away. Suddenly, the guildmaster, Lord Raken, entered without knocking. He came in to ask how the recruitment of people for the group to conquer the gate was going. Ibis shared his doubts about Elliot with him, to which the Lord told him to check him again. Although he immediately rejected this idea, saying that he simply had to form a team from any candidates as quickly as possible. After all, this time they will have plenty of witnesses. The day of the test came. The warriors gathered at the gate, near which several groups of warriors had already gathered. Suddenly, other adventurers approached them, unhappy to see former slaves in their crew. The thing was that all the warriors thought that slaves would only be a hindrance in battle. After all, they all went through an honest procedure of transition from the first round to the second. Ibis himself came out to meet the heroes, saying that a test would now begin, where they would be given the opportunity to show their skills. And based on the results of this test, he will choose those who will go to the gate of 100 people. All the warriors passed through the portal and found themselves in the forest. Some of them would team up to hunt the boss together. A group of adventurers saw a monster that looked like a spider. It was not a serious opponent for them, and the magician destroyed it with one charge. However, the magic ball did not cause a single scratch on the monster. The warriors realized that this monster seemed to be resistant to magic. Moreover, the next second, a huge number of spiders similar to him crawled out of the bushes. Only close combat warriors somehow dealt with them. They were already quite tired, because the monsters turned out to be stronger than they thought. Their mage leader realized that it would be difficult for them to fight so many monsters, and if this continued, they would be the first to leave the inspection. To prevent this, even though it was dangerous, they decided not to wait for the boss to find them, but to look for him themselves. Elliot knew that most teams in this competition would do this, but he decided to continue dealing with the mobs. The guy realized that there would be terrible competition in the boss battle, and this battle could be quite dangerous, because no one knows what people will do against each other there. Suddenly, on the way to the boss, one of the groups encountered a place where poison was spread. They saw the escape gate and immediately ran in its direction. However, a huge, creepy, mushroom-shaped monster stood in their way. Even the magician could no longer hold his breath, and the poison spread to him as well. Meanwhile, Elliot and Debo saw a signal fire in the sky. This meant that someone had found the boss, and everyone was called to destroy him. Everyone had already gathered in one place, but one detachment was missing. They did not wait, and one of the warriors began his speech. It turned out that the boss destroyed the squad that did not come on signal. It was a crazy, poisonous mushroom. Many, having heard about the monster, immediately said that it could not be defeated, and it was worth looking for a retreat gate. Even Elliot hesitated, knowing that the poison around the mushroom would make it difficult to get close to it. But the warrior continued to speak, and reported that the boss had blocked all escape routes. Elliot immediately said that they needed to develop a plan of action, otherwise they would die in battle with such a powerful enemy. He offered the others to become bait for 1.5 million coins. However, the man who had slandered them earlier told them not to get cocky, because it was very difficult to distract such a boss. Besides, if they fail to lure the boss to themselves, they will all die immediately. But Elliot said he still didn't have a better idea, because if he knew how to kill the boss, he wouldn't have set off the signal fire. A girl intervened in their conversation, saying that she was ready to pay if they could distract the boss. Elliot said they didn't have to pay right away, and if they couldn't escape, they would become victims. However, for this to happen, everyone must agree to these conditions. A little later, Elliot found the monster devouring its previous victim. He immediately fired a fiery arrow straight into the monster's face and hit it. Elliot's attack did not cause him any significant damage, and he immediately rushed towards the disturbers of his peace to kill them. While the monsters were distracted by the warriors, the rest rushed to activate the retreat gate. A portal appeared, and many had already managed to escape into it. Everything went according to plan, and the poisonous mushroom chased after the two heroes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a horde of spiders crawled out, but Debo was in no hurry to give up, confronting them with his axe. Suddenly, right behind him, the crazy mushroom let out a piercing howl. But the next second, Elliot fired a fire arrow at him, and it knocked him back. However, the mushroom managed to dodge the next arrow fired by the hero. The monster easily dodged the arrows, guided by telekinesis, and caught up with the heroes. He was already close when the guys jumped off the cliff. A powerful explosion was heard at the place where the monster stood. The heroes jumped off the cliff, landed right in the river, and were saved. A little later, the two of them emerged from the water unharmed. Elliot said that in order to defeat the dungeon monsters, you need to be much better prepared. Debo couldn't believe that Elliot was actually going to fight this monster. He sincerely didn't understand how it was possible to defeat a boss that fire arrows didn't work on. Tired of listening to Debo's objections, Elliot asked if he was going to break the contract, to which Debo replied that he hadn't even thought about it, but wanted an additional reward for this battle. Meanwhile, the rest of the heroes were returning from the dungeon gates. Ibis noticed that everyone had returned except those two former slaves. He asked why the warriors had left the two of them and simply run away with their tails between their legs. The Lord also said that since everyone had left, they needed to return. But the girl objected, because Elliot and his partner were still inside, and the gate was still activated, which meant they were still alive. But Ibis said that their death was only a matter of time, because she herself said that it was impossible to kill the mushroom. Meanwhile, the battle against the mushroom was still going on. Right now, Elliot was aiming at the terrible monster. He fired a particularly powerful fire arrow straight at the monster. However, he understood that his fire attacks would be few, but if he increased their power and gave them rotation using telekinesis, then at high speed their power would be much greater. The young man came up with this technique himself by studying how bullets fly. It was this skill that helped him cope with what was beyond the capabilities of ordinary hunters. The spin-enhanced arrow pierced the mushroom, flying through it. However, Elliot missed slightly and cut off his arm, while he was aiming for his head. The monster roared in pain and immediately went to the place from where the arrow was fired. Now it was much more difficult for Elliot to shoot, because his target was moving at great speed, but he knew he only had a chance if he killed the monster before it reached him. However, everything was not so simple, and Debo was waiting in ambush to strike the monster with his axe. They prepared and set a trap, which the giant mushroom tripped over. Right now he was in the swamp that was in front of the huge rock that Elliot stood on. Distracted by the archer, the monster did not notice how Debo came up behind him and struck him with his axe. The guy challenged the monster to a fight, confident in his own strength. They followed their plan, the purpose of which was to lure the monster into the swamp. This was done to disable him from using the poison, as his pores were now clogged. Now Debo struck him with his axe, which was enhanced with a fire arrow. The weapon hit its target and seriously wounded the monster. Standing in the swamp, he could no longer move quickly and dodge attacks. The next attack was a twisted arrow from Elliot that pierced straight into the monster. For a long time nothing could be seen because of the smoke, but still, despite the damage it had received, the monster was still alive. Suddenly he grabbed the axe that Debo was fighting with and pulled on it. But Elliot, using telekinesis, lifted the log to protect his partner. With this log, he hit the mushroom right in the face. It was a chance to attack for Debo. He snatched his weapon from the clutches of the weakened poisonous mushroom, and the next second he rushed into the attack at great speed. He swung his sharp axe to strike the monster in the head. The monster did not give up and wanted to grab the hero with its clawed paw. Only now the guy was already behind him and struck him with a fire axe. He managed to cut off the head of a crazy poisonous mushroom. Now his body was left standing motionless without a head. The guys had already relaxed because they thought they had been able to defeat the monster. However, the next second, a huge paw clenched into a fist threatened Debo from behind. Despite the fact that the monster had no head, it delivered a powerful blow, hitting the hero straight on. The guy dropped his weapon from surprise and pain, and the monster burst into evil laughter. Elliot didn't understand what was going on, because he was sure that the core of the monster's life energy was in its head. He lifted the headless body of the monster onto a log. But then the mushroom's body jumped off the trap and began to climb the mountain on which Elliot stood. The hero has one last arrow left, after which he will not be able to wait for reloading. At that moment, Debo woke up from the blow, screaming in rage that this monster had pissed him off. He threw his axe with great force straight at the mushroom climbing the slope. The sharp weapon cut the mushroom in half, and its lower part fell into the swamp. However, despite this, the rest of the monster still continued to climb upward. However, Elliot was already ready to use his last arrow. He saw the real head of the poisonous mushroom, which was hidden in his chest. Now he was ready to strike to kill the monster. In order to accurately penetrate his defense, he used a twisted fire arrow. She passed right through the monster's heart and threw it aside. Now, using the rope, Elliot pulled Debo up towards him. The guy shared his thoughts about how he thought he would die here. The heroes thought the battle was already over, and were going to take the life energy core as soon as the poison dissipated. However, it turned out that even with a pierced chest, the monster could still fight. Meanwhile, Ibis returned to Lord Rakal to report the failure. He told the most important person that he thought it would be best to hand over the matter to the Swan Knights. However, at that very moment, someone entered the door uninvited. Elliot came to them, looking terribly battered and exhausted. Lord Rakal was extremely interested in this event. He asked Ibis what was going on, and how someone could come back from the dead. Now he turned to Elliot, saying that he had lived up to the rumors about his ability to survive. Now he wanted to ask the hero one question. He asked Elliot if he could show his skills in the Gate of 100 Men again. He said he could do it, but it would be difficult. Then the Lord asked what the hero wanted for this. Later at the tavern, Elliot told Debo that he demanded 5 million per person to clear the gate. Suddenly the warriors who had been with them during the test approached them. It turned out that they had come to apologize for doubting their abilities. In addition, they brought them the money they had promised for saving their lives. The next day, Elliot and Debo arrived at a camp set up around the Gate of 100 Men. They were greeted by an adventurer from another guild. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a blonde girl in armor. It turned out that the Gapor Guild, of which Elliot was a member, was going to work with the Order of the Knights of Sinus. They followed the teachings of Empress Sinus and were the strongest unit. Since they would need to work together, the girl demanded that the hero follow her orders. Then a squad of frightening people appeared. It was the Tick Trading Guild. There were also troops from other respected guilds here. Of course, there were already 3 red-haired sisters here, whom Ibis feared so much. The red-haired man in armor introduced himself and said that they had been chosen to guard the raid. His name was Lanko. He and his squad will cover the heroes as they leave the gate. He reminded the heroes that the rights to the items they had dropped remained with their guilds. And if they are suddenly caught trying to steal an item, they will have to face their squad. It turned out that the guards had 5 adventurer circles, which meant they were very strong warriors. After the opening speech, all the heroes headed into the portal. The blonde girl told Elliot to follow her, as she would lead their squad. Elliot moved forward with determination, knowing that this was where it would all start. The entire squad followed the fair-haired man in black armor. Walking through the huge grass, Debo wondered how it could grow so big. The girl told him to stop admiring nature and to walk quickly, keeping up with them. Her comments irritated the guy, and he turned to Elliot to complain, but saw a strange picture. The guy pressed his ear to the ground, as if listening to something. It turned out that he had heard the running of the ribbon pigs from afar. The herd of thousands divided the detachment, breaking it down the middle. The warriors' plan was to lead them to an area where there would be more obstacles and kill them there. Suddenly, the girl's subordinate reported to her that 2 of the Gaypore guild had disappeared. It turned out that Elliot had heard the pigs approaching long before, and they had taken refuge in a safe place. Tape-headed pigs were dangerous monsters. Their body length was 2 meters, and they were very aggressive. They were tough opponents, but they could be killed, and most likely the other guilds thought the same. But Elliot chose not to engage in battle with them, saving his strength, because no one had returned from this raid before he returned here. Suddenly taking a step, Devo stumbled upon a trap. A slab of sharpened logs suddenly stood right in front of the guy, and the next second, the logs began to attack the soldiers with shells. Another group also stumbled upon one of the traps, but the mighty warrior easily dealt with her, cutting the log in half with his sword. It turned out that someone had set these traps all over the dungeon. These were unusual monsters, because they possessed at least some intelligence. Suddenly, one of the squad members turned around and saw that someone had cut off his partner's head. Some guy killed the whole group and no one even noticed who it was. The red-haired sisters just happened to come across a strange man with a staff in his hand. It turns out that they suddenly froze in place and couldn't even move. The strange magician told them not to even try to move, because his magic was working. Gathering all her strength, one of the girls asked why he was doing this, but he only replied that he was impressed that she could speak under his spell. And then, since she seemed more dangerous to him than the others, he killed her with a magic shot to the stomach. After he dealt with one of the girls, the magician really wondered why he was doing this. He said it would be clearer if I showed it. Taking the staff in his hands and making a creepy face, he replied that all this was for the sake of the black magician. After which the sorcerer created a fiery arrow and pierced the remaining girls with it. He was clearly tired of his duties, saying he just wanted to fool around. But he remembered his commander saying that he would never accept failure in this matter. That's why he couldn't shirk after something like that. The magician understood that all he had to do was take the matter seriously, because there was no other way out. Meanwhile, Elliot and Debo made their way into the Hob camp. Debo was very surprised to see such monsters. He thought that they were all bosses. But, despite the fact that there was only one boss among them, the problem was that each of them was strong, and they had a lot of health. Moreover, many of them could even use skills. Even Elliot wasn't going to attack these monsters with just the 2 of them. A little later, Debo attacked one of the monsters with his axe, but missed. The counterattack was not long in coming, and the Hob swung his huge fist at him. But the guy deftly dodged and ended up behind him. He continued to dodge the attacks of the huge green monster. Once he almost touched him with his huge paw. But still, Debo waited for the opportunity to strike the monster with his axe. He dealt the Hob several chopping blows, and he was already ready to deliver the final finishing blow to the monster's back. But he dodged at the last moment, and the guy hit the floor with his weapon. The counterpunch landed right on Debo, sending him flying into a tree. The guy realized that this fight would not be easy. He dodged and did it in time, because the Hob broke the tree in half that the guy was leaning on. He managed to cut off one of the monster's huge paws. But the next second he grabbed it with his healthy hand. And after that, holding the guy by the head, he hit him hard on the ground. But Debo didn't give up, and with the last of his strength he twisted his arm and was able to break free. He increased the distance between himself and the monster to gain momentum. With a swift leap, someone attacked the monster from above with their weapon. Finally, the green Hob was defeated, and lay in a pool of its own blood. It turned out that Elliot helped him a little in the fight. Suddenly, the 2 of them reached the place where the soldiers of the detachment lay with their heads cut off. To their horror, there was only one survivor among them. Elliot asked what happened here and if they were attacked by Hobs. The warrior replied that nothing of the sort had happened, and that it was trolling. It turned out that there were people who attacked adventurers, and took advantage of the fact that no one knew what was going on inside the gate. Debo couldn't believe the words of the surviving warrior. Elliot confirmed the adventurer's words, saying that he did not see Lady Kiri here. The surviving boy blamed himself for not noticing the enemy among them. It turns out that before it all ended, the girl said that she was a follower of a black magician. It was a powerful being who, along with countless followers, threatened the world of Maple 800 years ago. Then 6 heroes rose up to stop him. When the battle between them began, the situation changed. The allied forces counterattacked against the followers, and chaos ensued among their ranks. Now Elliot said that it looked like they wouldn't be able to hunt monsters this time, because the first thing they had to do was find this woman. The surviving warrior said he would go with them. Meanwhile, Lady Kiri was running somewhere quickly. She came across a mage and an assassin among the tall grass, who cut off the heads of the squad's warriors. She asked who they were and prepared to fight, drawing her sword. Meanwhile, Debo carried the surviving soldier on his back, saying that everything would be fine. However, this soldier suddenly pulled out a poisoned blade from behind his back. Lady Kiri meanwhile fought against the 2 followers of the Black Mage using her Rising Sun skill. She bravely repelled the enemy's attacks and was even able to cut off one of their hands. But still, their strength was far superior to hers. Suddenly, an unknown warrior came to her aid and cut off the head of her opponent. It was Debo, who arrived just in time. It turns out that after the surviving warrior wanted to attack Debo, Elliot protected him with his fire arrow. He hit the target right on target, cutting off the warrior's hand. Moreover, Elliot did not leave the traitor alive, saying that he already did not trust people. Debo's appearance was an unpleasant surprise for the magician, who said that they were not expecting uninvited guests. He said that since they both looked strong, they would have to let their elite in. Immediately, several followers of the Black Magician rushed to attack the 2 heroes. Dodging an attack from one of them, Debo immediately struck with his fire axe. But the next second he had to dodge an arrow from an archer who was hiding behind the grass. Distracted by the girl, the guy didn't notice the swordsman who had approached him from behind. He dealt him a slashing blow with his sword, but only scratched the guy. The next blow from them was a jumping attack that the swordsman tried to deliver. However, he failed, and he was cut down by Debo's huge axe. He continued to swing his weapon, striking at his opponents. The girl said that they disappointed her and that they all did not look like the elite. Seeing that his warriors were unable to cope, the magician himself intervened in the battle. He aimed a fiery arrow at the heroes. She was about to reach Debo, as she was much faster than Elliot's. Immediately there was a huge explosion, scattering patches of earth everywhere. But it turned out that Elliot arrived just in time to protect the boy. The magician was amazed by his appearance, asking who he even was. But Elliot just pointed his finger at something in the grass, saying that their guests were running there. Just now, a herd of ribbon pigs was approaching them from that direction. Having barely dodged the deadly animals, the magician said that they were making his life very difficult. After they finished dealing with the animals, he told them to immediately head off in pursuit of the heroes. The magician ordered his minions, if they met the hero in the cloak, to restrain him, and he himself would deal with him. But one of the warriors replied that the magician did not have to fight him alone, because he did not look like an ordinary hero. However, he assured that everything was fine, because there was no one stronger than him in these gates. Now the 3 heroes were walking together. Debo asked why Elliot didn't kill those followers of the Black Magician. But the guy replied that those warriors were stronger than him, which surprised Debo very much. Elliot remembered that his fire arrow had only changed its own trajectory, and had no effect on the arrow fired by the mage. Meanwhile, the circles on his wrist became significantly thicker, meaning that his abilities were at their peak. Elliot realized that if he was at the peak of the power of the 2 rings, then they should be on par with the sorcerer. But he had too strong a magic. This meant that he had somehow enhanced his abilities. The girl intervened in their conversation, saying that what was important was that the followers of the Black Magician were able to infiltrate the ranks of the Knights of Sinas, and this was a problem on which the fate of the world would depend. Therefore, they needed to leave immediately and warn the others about this. But Elliot objected, saying that even if she told about these people, no one would be able to get rid of them. After all, the followers of the Black Magician hid their identities for several generations and grew deep into the organizations. This means that if we announce that they have returned, they will start covering their tracks, digging deeper. Then an enraged Lady Kiri asked what if it didn't work, and what he was even offering in return. She continued to shout, saying that Elliot had not come up with any plan, and the Black Magician's followers were now chasing them. To which the guy replied that they would have to show them who was really the hunter. Meanwhile, the traitors found heroes, but the warriors were ready, and Debo struck one of them with his axe. But the red-haired warrior with the blade dodged the powerful blow. At the same time, the second traitor intended to attack Debo from behind. But suddenly he was knocked down by a log from one of the traps. Distracted, the red-haired man lost his vigilance and took a kick right to the face from Debo. The guy continued to beat the Black Magician's follower, delivering powerful blows. Looking at this, the girl with the crossbow could not aim in order to shoot at the enemy, and not at an ally. But suddenly Lady Kiri appeared behind her, and she could no longer shoot. She swung her golden ball at the girl, who managed to parry the blow with her blade at the last moment. Meanwhile, the magician found Elliot and asked if he had been waiting for him here specifically. However, without waiting for an answer, he created a fire arrow and directed it straight at the hero. Elliot also formed an arrow and aimed it against the mage's shot, but the guy easily dodged the arrow flying at him. He immediately fired a return arrow at the magician. The shot hit its target and created a huge explosion behind which the enemy disappeared. Stones immediately started flying at Elliot. Suddenly, the magician appeared right behind the hero, ready to attack. Everything around was on fire because the trees were burning, set on fire by fire arrows. Seeing Elliot's power, the mage asked what he used to enhance his magic. After all, judging by his level, he wouldn't have had enough firepower alone. But the guy didn't answer him, so the magician decided that he would find out everything himself during the battle. To hit him, Elliot used his special skill, a twisted fire arrow. The magician realized that the guy was spinning the arrow with telekinesis, as if he was twisting magic into it. It was precisely these kinds of inventive warriors that this magician hated the most. He began to attack Elliot with his fire arrows, but he defended himself with a boulder raised by telekinesis. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an arrow appeared, which almost hit the magician, because he did not notice it. Now the old man was trying to get to the guy with his shot. Elliot fired his own twisted arrow to meet the enemy's arrow. There was a powerful explosion, but Elliot remained on his feet. Suddenly the magician used poisonous breath. Now Elliot couldn't move for half an hour, as per the magician's plan. Since his fire arrow hadn't recovered yet either, he was going to finish the guy off with a knife. He cried out in a mad rush that he wanted to see despair on Elliot's face. However, the boy kept pretending that he couldn't move, and the next second he raised his fist to hit the old man. He didn't expect this, and didn't have time to dodge Elliot's powerful blow. With a blow, he lifted him into the air and threw him a decent distance away. The hero continued to beat the magician, and he could do nothing. Meanwhile, the recharge period of Elliot's fire arrow expired, and he was about to finish off the magician. Elliot hit the tree the mage was leaning against, hitting him. In a rage, the old man used the poison attack again, but it had no effect on the hero. Now the guy thought that the magician would try to get his staff back, and then he would definitely kill him. However, the old man used a magic circle to shoot out a powerful blast of flame. In a frenzy, he screamed that he would tear the boy to pieces. This powerful blow hit Elliot because he lost his vigilance. He never expected that the mage had a fireball hidden up his sleeve as a trump card. Another attack was already approaching him directly, threatening a powerful explosion. Debo, who was fighting the mage's minions, heard a huge explosion behind him. He was worried about how Elliot's battle with this mage was going. Suddenly, out of nowhere, hobbies appeared and attacked Lady Kiri and Debo. But these were no ordinary monsters, for among them was their leader. The magician used all his powers and hoped that Elliot was already dead. He even regretted not asking the hero's name, but the next second Elliot told him his name. He also said to remember it, because it was the last name he would hear in his life. The magician said that the guy was trying to bluff, but he still wouldn't succeed. However, Elliot understood that he would not be able to defeat this magician, because he only had 2 adventurer rings. He wanted to absorb the mana stone, to which the magician laughed, saying that he would not succeed. But the next second, a 3rd circle began to shine on his wrist. Seeing this, the old man rushed at Elliot in a rage, but he shot a fiery arrow towards him. To repel the boy's attack, the magician created another fireball. However, the spiraling fire arrow managed to pierce the ball's magical energy. Now all that was left of the magician was his lower body, and everything else was burned in the flames of the fire arrow. Meanwhile, Lady Kiri and Debo were hiding from the green hobbies. Everything didn't go according to plan, so they didn't know what to do next. At first, they easily cut down the green monsters with their weapons. However, suddenly there was a powerful explosion, and it was unclear who created it. It turned out that it was the leader of the hobbits, who knew how to use the fire skill with the help of a staff. Suddenly, a huge green paw appeared from behind the tree where the heroes were hiding. The girl managed to escape from them with difficulty, carrying the heavy guy on her. She threw Debo up into the air to cut down the monster threatening her. She was not in a better position, because she could only deal with them if they attacked one by one. Suddenly, her escape route was blocked by a wall of flame. She was able to dodge the fireball while holding the boy in her arms. Suddenly, Debo gathered his strength and was able to stand up, protecting the girl. He rushed forward to slay the green monsters. He immediately killed several of them by cutting off their heads. After dodging the fireball, he got to the point where he could use the skill. He had already swung his axe at the monster, ready to strike. But suddenly the monster shot a fiery projectile at him. The boy survived, but his clothes were burned and he was thrown away from the monster. Lady Kiri told him to step aside so she could fight alone. But suddenly, a twisted arrow was directed straight towards the throne on which the monster was sitting. The shot hit the target, decapitating the green hob. It turned out that Elliot came to the aid of the heroes, and it seems, just in time. Suddenly the gates through which the warriors entered this place began to collapse. The heroes managed to escape from the portal, but were completely exhausted. Elliot came to his senses only when he was already lying in bed. The guard immediately began to interrogate him. Because of all the merchants from the Gapor Guild who entered there, only the 3 of them survived. Hearing this, the guy was very surprised, because he didn't know that everyone else had died there. Elliot told the guard that they had encountered a demon there. He drew a picture of the Hob Mage, which the guard showed to the others as the boss of the 100-man gate. Everyone else realized that these monsters were so intelligent that in large numbers, they could become equal to a human army. One of the guild masters said he knew there was trolling. Everyone at the meeting believed that it was imperative to find out what happened at the gate. They began to hint that the survivors of the Gapor Guild were to blame for everything. However, Ibis countered, saying that they had not taken any items from the gate, meaning they had no motive. However, after defeating the boss, Elliot received a phoenix feather that increased his attack by a whopping 30%, and he really wanted to take it with him. However, Kiri understood that if they took anything out of the gate, they would immediately become suspects of trolling. But fortunately, Elliot found a pet snail in the gate that could collect all sorts of objects. The guy hid the phoenix feather in it, which he wanted to get so much. 3 years ago, before Elliot went back in time, the whole world was in hell. Debo lived in complete poverty and could only watch as his younger sister suffered from the black blood disease every day. Since he was in captivity, he could not be there even when his family died. But one day he was freed by a warrior with an axe, Oran. After that, they fought together with her in the same squad. They, along with other warriors, killed monsters all over the world. Oran was the strongest warrior alive. 1 year was enough for Debo to change and look at the world in a new way. One day, a girl asked them to accompany her to the mine to find her brother. But Oran replied that she could not complete the task, since she did not accept personal requests. Besides, there was no guarantee that her brother was still alive. However, Debo intervened in the conversation, saying that it seemed like they were the girl's last hope. He said firmly that he wanted to help her, and would be responsible for the girl's safety, so that she would go with them. So they entered a mine filled with the corpses of adventurers. In each of the dead, they looked for the girl's brother. Suddenly, something invisible began to attack the warriors from everywhere. Debo grabbed the defenseless girl and was able to dodge the blow. It turned out that they were attacked by the ancient warrior Zakum. Oran and the entire squad immediately intervened in the battle to bring down the monster. Leaving the girl alone, Debo also rushed forward into battle to help the boys. They attacked the multi-armed stone monster at the same time. Finally, the fight was over, and the monster was defeated. However, the girl that Debo was supposed to protect disappeared. Apparently, she went into one of the caves of the dungeon. Oran warned the rest of the squad to remain vigilant, as she sensed an even stronger energy coming from the hole than the previous monster. Debo said that he would go there alone, since it was his fault that the girl got lost. But Oran said that she would go with him, because whatever was inside was a threat to the world of Clyon. They passed through the opening in the wall and saw a tree under which a girl was sitting next to a lying man. It turned out that she was crying there over the corpse of her older brother. The girl was sure that Debo would follow her, because she knew that he was kind, but she could no longer go back. It turned out that Zakum was a demonic tree that could control objects like the previous monster. Oran thanked the girl for warning her about the demonic tree, but then she said that she had figured out her plan because she had used her brother for the sacrifice. It turned out that this girl was already controlled by a demonic tree. Suddenly, someone stabbed Debo from behind with a sword. Oran was also attacked by an unknown warrior with a spear. It turned out that they were members of the Oran squad, who were convinced by the tree that their friends had died. The girl said that it was useless to tell them anything, because for them they were objects of revenge. And now the real battle in the name of the Black Magician was about to begin. Now Debo and Oran fought against their friends. The guy felt that it was all his fault, because it was he who led them here. He almost killed one of his previous comrades. In a last burst of reason, she touched his cheek with her palm. The girl thanked Debo for everything and told him to take care of Oran. Meanwhile, the mighty warrior fought against the demonic tree. It once again created a huge golem to protect itself. Oran killed the girl who brought them here by stabbing her with her axe. Now all that remains is a statue controlled by a demonic tree. Suddenly Debo screamed and grabbed his head, throwing down his weapon. He understood that the demon tree wanted to take over his mind, and told Oran to kill it as quickly as possible. Suddenly he saw his sister lying there in the dungeon, breathless. The demonic tree convinced him that the girl was killed by Oran. Thus the tree completely took over Debo's mind, and he attacked the warrior. She didn't have time to kill him before the battle between them began. Now the warriors fought against each other, striking with their axes. Oren used her most powerful skill to destroy the Zakam statue. Suddenly Debo jumped in, but the girl could no longer stop. In her thoughts, she asked the guy for forgiveness. And the next second, the tree and the statue shattered into small pieces from Oren's powerful blow. After the tree was destroyed, Debo woke up from his obsession. He saw Oren lying in a pool of her own blood. It turns out that she deliberately put herself under Debo's axe, because she believed that his talent had no equal. She said that Debo was her only student and she couldn't kill him. After Oren died, Debo told her hero friends about it, and then returned to his familiar path. However, he was unable to find a new purpose in his life, and was unable to atone for the sins he had committed. But all this was as if in another reality, and now he woke up, lying on clean bed linen in his bed, and his sister greeted him, saying that she was worried because he hadn't woken up for a long time. The guy replied that he didn't remember anything, but it seemed like he had a nightmare. His sister said they had a guest, and Debo came out to greet him. Of course, it was Elliot who said he needed to hurry. To Debo's surprise, they came to the slums. Although it used to be a great place, now it was just a haven for bandits. Suddenly, a man flew out from somewhere towards the heroes, almost knocking them off their feet. It turned out that someone was threatening this man with a knife. He suddenly called Elliot and Debo his older brothers, asking them to protect him. The mustachioed man with the knife said their adopted younger brother stole his items and sold them. Now he demanded 3 million coins for this artifact. To stop him from screaming anymore, Elliot threw money in the mustachioed man's face, after which he called the man Ralph and told him to follow him. It turned out that Elliot had come here specifically to hire him. During their conversation, a girl who was looking for Elliot here suddenly appeared. She came here with the goal of recruiting the hero and his squad into the Khania Guild. To join, they had to pass a raid test, but they would be paid several million coins at once. Elliot threw the money into Ralph's hands, believing that the contract with him had been signed. Later, they came to Lady Kiri to invite her to join their squad as well. Now they were all heading towards the gates together to take part in a test raid. Many other squads had already gathered around, their members also preparing for battle. The same girl appeared, whose name was Beiji from the Khania Trade Guild. The 50-man orange-level gate was chosen for the raid. It turned out that Elliot had defended this gate in the past, meaning his plan remained the same. A little later, all the warriors headed towards the portal to enter the gate. As soon as they entered, they saw a meat grinder in which monsters were cruelly dealing with adventurers. These monsters, although small, were called Devil's Eyes. One of them immediately pinned Debo with his paw and wanted to eat him, but with a powerful kick, Elliot threw the monster away. Kiri said that it was very strange that the entrance to the gate led straight to the center of the pack of monsters. Meanwhile, the monsters were having fun because they saw new easy prey. But then Elliot fired a fire arrow and used telekinesis to kill many of them. The whole squad began to fight against the one-eyed monsters. However, these monsters were quite agile and dodged the blows of Kiri's sword. Having dodged, one of them managed to wound the girl. Immediately, seeing her weakness, the monsters attacked her in a huge crowd. Suddenly, one of the monsters was blown into small pieces. It turned out that it was Ralph who entered the battle, and he was quite strong, because he already had 3 adventurer circles. With his powerful fist, the man continued to smash the monsters, who died from one blow. Ralph was really happy doing something that made him money. Suddenly, someone kicked him in the back, preventing him from fighting the monsters. It turned out that it was Elliot who did it. He deliberately pushed Ralph out of his place. After all, the next second, rays released from nowhere pierced the monsters, and the one-eyed monsters kept coming, surrounding the warriors. This shot was fired by an archer who was sitting on one of the branches of a tree. In this way, Elliot lured the monsters towards himself, gathering them into a heap. The archer shot and pierced the monsters with numerous arrows, killing them. But suddenly the blue arrows appeared on the other side and Elliot couldn't dodge. There was a powerful explosion, scattering stones around. Suddenly, magic arrows attacked the entire squad from above, and the heroes had nowhere to run. These arrows, fired out of nowhere, pierced most of the team. But Lady Kiri, with the help of her sword, was able to repel several, protecting the girl. She told her to run into the forest as quickly as possible if she wanted to live. However, all escape routes were blocked, because one-eyed monsters were waiting for them in the forest. Then Elliot cleared the way with his fire arrow, killing the monsters in the forest. Everyone immediately rushed into the passage formed by the flame. Magic arrows caught up with the heroes, flying at their backs. Debo understood that if nothing was done, they would all die here at this rate. The archer pursued the fleeing warriors, not allowing them to escape. He suddenly realized that one of the warriors was missing when an explosion went off behind him. Unable to hold on, the archer fell from the branch on which he was hiding. It was Elliot who tricked him by picking up an axe instead of his staff. Debo was already happy that the plan had worked, but suddenly one of the archer's arrows pierced his stomach through and through. Elliot turned around to see an arrow flying straight at him. Although one archer was shot down, there must have been several as the shelling continued. The heroes tried with all their might to escape, saving their lives, but their strength was waning. Suddenly, Debo and Kiri were picked up by Ralph, because he was the only one still able to run. They ran in the direction Elliot had told them to, but they didn't know where they were going. Suddenly, the bushes ended, and the second gate opened before the heroes. Now Ralph wanted to enter this gate without Elliot, but Debo said that the hero cannot be left alone. Ralph shouted that they would go into the second dungeon and wait for Elliot there. Suddenly, arrows appeared from the front, trying to pierce the heroes. They were already approaching Ralph, ready to kill him on the spot. But he was protected by an axe that Elliot directed using telekinesis. And the next second, he pushed the heroes with a log straight into the second gate. They flew there helplessly, because they could not resist the blow from surprise. The archer, seeing everything that was happening, thought that it seemed that Elliot was crazy. Now the battle between the hero and the archer began. The assassin responded to every movement of the guy by firing an arrow. But so far he had only encountered one-eyed monsters. However, with these shots he gave away his location, and immediately, slightly missing, but close enough, Elliot fired an arrow. The archer said it was good, but not enough to affect him. But now, with his shot, Elliot also revealed his location. The archer immediately shot there, but there was no one there anymore. However, suddenly, Elliot's fire arrow appeared behind him again. The assassin realized that the boy was using telekinesis to confuse him. Another 2 arrows, weaving through the trees, headed towards him. Now, in order to fight them off, the archer had to shoot his arrows at them, because he no longer had time to dodge. Due to the explosion that had been created, he was now unable to track Elliot's movements. Now the assassin only managed to fire his arrow at the enemies at the last moment. There was a powerful explosion that threw the archer back. Now the guy decided to play seriously and hide more carefully than before. He remembered that in his past life there was no one so strong in this gate, which meant that his appearance changed the course of events. Suddenly the archer shouted at him to come out and stop wasting time. Elliot realized that there was no way the assassin could have appeared on the other side without revealing his presence, so perhaps he had used teleportation, but it could also be an illusion. That's how it was. The archer was just a distraction, while he himself was behind the hero. Meanwhile, the members of Elliot's squad teleported somewhere through the gate. When they landed, they found themselves in an unpleasant place with a lot of corpses around. Lady Kiri said that she realized that the Kanya Guild had tricked them. She said that they lured them here on purpose because they were followers of a black magician. However, their conversation was interrupted by a huge monster that suddenly appeared. It looks like this giant was the boss of this place. To counter him, Ralph grabbed the necklace on his chest, saying that he would have to use secret tricks. It turned out that the man's specialty was healing, and he was the best priest healer with 3 circles. Using his amulet, he instantly healed Kiri and Debo. All the wounds that the archer had inflicted on them instantly healed. Now, after he had cured them, he decided to run away, leaving the snow monster to the other 2 warriors. The beast let out a powerful roar in rage, driving the intruders away from its territory, and the next second he closed his jaws on the place where the heroes had just been. However, Debo managed to escape by clinging to the monster's fang. Lady Kiri had already struck him with her sword. Debo hit him in the eye and the monster roared in pain. At this point, Ralph himself intervened, kicking the monster. Debo realized that the man was not just restoring their health, he was also attacking the monster to cover them. Ralph used Blessing, which increased the strength and speed of the other warriors. At last, the great snow beast was defeated. Now after the battle, Ralph offered the heroes to pay for his services. But suddenly the giant monster let out a roar, which meant that it could still fight. Meanwhile, Elliot ran, escaping from the arrows. He couldn't figure out where the assassin was shooting from. The hero deflected arrows with fiery projectiles, but he couldn't aim properly because he didn't know where the archer was hiding. The assassin thought the guy was trying to distract him in order to get to the second gate. Elliot couldn't engage in a battle of attrition with an enemy if he didn't know where they were, meaning that if he continued like this, he would die. Since his mana was running low, he took out a bottle of liquid and drank it, restoring his condition. Now he has protected himself from the arrows of the fire sphere archer, and the next second, while the assassin was not looking, numerous fiery arrows appeared from the sphere. Elliot used the most difficult spell of the 3rd circle and created 6 arrows. The hero continued to shoot fire arrows, even without knowing the exact location of the enemy. There was fire everywhere, because the trees set on fire by the discharges were warming them. Despite drinking a mana restoration potion, the shock of its lack was about to overtake Elliot. But the hero told himself that he should not fall, but should continue to fight. The assassin knew that such attacks were useless against him, and that the boy would eventually die from the shock of lack of mana. But Elliot held on, because he still had strength left. He created a huge explosion of fire to engulf everything around him in flames. The assassin realized that at this rate he would burn alive if he didn't get out of here. He saw an open field and immediately headed there. However, he suddenly realized that it was suspicious that the field had appeared in front of him right now. It realized that it had to return to the burning forest, because it was a trap. This is exactly what Elliot expected from the assassin. Having ambushed him, he hit the guy with a stone, which he controlled using telekinesis. He continued to attack the assassin, causing him to lose his position in the fight. Finally, Elliot found him and prepared for a direct attack. But the archer parried the blow with his staff and defended himself with his bow. Elliot also dodged a sharp kick. They clashed in hand-to-hand combat, but suddenly Elliot broke the assassin's bow. Suddenly, more magic arrows appeared from somewhere behind, and the hero jumped away from the archer to avoid being hit by them. The assassin said that Elliot wouldn't have time to accumulate mana for an attack spell, so he needed to be finished off right now. But suddenly behind him there was a blade, driven by telekinesis. The archer realized that Elliot was using telekinesis, because it takes up a minimal amount of mana. Seizing the moment, he jumped out of the dust to attack the hero with his weapon. The hero was quite good at close combat, and it was difficult for the assassin to fight him. A little confused, he took a kick to the stomach from Elliot. The hero had already swung his staff to strike the archer. One of the arrows suddenly pierced his hand. The assassin immediately grabbed the blade to finish off Elliot. Now the warrior had only one healthy arm left, but he continued to fight. Suddenly he grabbed the assassin by the hand and began to hold him back. He activated the golden bracelet he wore on his wrist, and suddenly there was a powerful explosion. The assassin was thrown violently to the side and hit a tree. He couldn't even breathe from the impact and the smoke around him. Suddenly Elliot jumped out of the smoke and onto him. Another archer appeared from the scattered ashes. It turned out that there were two of them. They said that they had dragged this matter out too long and needed to return the phoenix feather quickly. However, it turned out that it was not his friend at all. But Elliot had changed into his clothes and was now ready to attack the assassin. With one blow of his blade, he cut off his head, and he himself fell unconscious. Meanwhile, in the second gate, the heroes fought the ice giant. This monster was so big and strong that it was difficult for all three of them to kill it. But Ralph was not discouraged and continued to strike straight at the monster's face. But his head was protected by a thick layer of ice, so it was extremely difficult to break through it. Suddenly the man was grabbed by the beast's clawed paw. But Kiri came to his aid, saying that she repaid him for the services he had rendered. In a rage, the huge monster struck the rock. The warriors tried to figure out how to defeat the monster, because its armor was too strong. Debo distracted the monster so that Ralph could get as close to its weak spot as possible. But it didn't work, because the snow monster noticed the deceptive maneuver. Now he wanted to swat Debo, who could no longer dodge his attack. The next second, the monster's huge paw fell on the place where the guy stood. Ralph told Kiri that he had about 4 healing charges left, so she should try to dodge the attacks. They decided to split up to wait for the monster to reveal its weak side. Suddenly, the snow monster threw Kiri away from itself with a powerful blow, and she lost consciousness. Debo lay unconscious in the crater that had formed from the snow giant's impact. But suddenly the guy gathered his strength and was able to move, intending to attack the monster again. He dealt him a slashing blow that cut through the protective ice and the monster itself in one go. Right now, Debo has raised his adventurer circle level. He swung his axe again and delivered a blow that reached the monster's life force core. But in desperation, the monster began to fight back against the hero. Then Ralph applied the cure to him so that Debo could continue to fight. But the next second, he himself was grabbed by the huge paw of an ice giant. However, the man said that now was not the time to worry about him, and that Debo had to deliver the finishing blow. He cut through the ice armor and thick skin of the monster with his axe. The blow was so powerful that it passed through the monster's body and once again touched the core of life energy. The giant beast screamed in pain. Ralph was unconscious and unable to move. Debo asked him what was going on. The monster fled from them in terror, losing its limbs along the way. Eventually, it broke into pieces of ice. At the camp after the battle, Lady Kiri finally woke up. Since it was terribly cold outside, Debo decided that it would be better to rest here in the cave, especially since Ralph still hadn't regained consciousness. Now that the girl had woken up, Debo went on a reconnaissance mission in search of the gate. A day had already passed, but there was still no news from Elliot. Suddenly, an ice-cold, one-eyed monster appeared behind him. Of course, he didn't come alone, but called a whole squad with him. Having dealt with them, he soon returned back to the camp, but still could not find the gate. Kiri told him that next time she would go with him, because if there were monsters there, then it was too dangerous to go there alone. But Debo said she needed to recuperate, and someone had to look after Ralph. The next day, Debo also went out on reconnaissance and encountered a squad of one-eyed monsters there. In addition to the monsters, there was a terrible cold that was everywhere in this dungeon. While fighting the monsters, he fell off a cliff and saw a frozen man there. He had a letter in his hands, which he held tightly. The letter stated that it was addressed to an unknown person, and offered his gloves to help the warrior in battle. It turned out that these people had fallen into a trap, and his partner had died at the hands of a snow monster. This warrior also found an exit gate, but it was special. He drew a rough map of the gate's location on the back of the letter, and asked only that the letter be delivered to his home. Debo buried the dead warrior as best he could, burying him in the ground. With the help of this letter, they were able to find the exit gate, and the three of them headed there. Through the portal, they returned to where they came from, running away from the archer. However, already at the exit, they were met by the Kanya Guild. Debo realized that in this state he would not be able to resist them. Kiri tried to fight against the traitor squad, but she was also weak. Several kunai pierced her leg, and the girl could no longer move. Suddenly, a fiery arrow pierced one of the attackers. With a feeling of joy, Debo looked back to see who had shot. Of course, it was Elliot who was able to survive the fight with the archer. The long-haired man sat in the room guarded by his loyal huge dog. He thought it was very strange that someone so experienced just appeared out of nowhere, and no one knew who was behind it. Then his subordinate came in and reported that Elliot had returned and what he should do with the contract. In a rage, the man told him to kill him. He also said that they were not in a position to worry about public opinion now, as Elliot was too unpredictable. However, the hero who entered said that he did not return alone, and that there were other warriors with him. And now Elliot's entire squad was resting at Debo's house. Kiri said she was sure Kanya had already heard the rumors, and that it wouldn't be a good idea for them to split up now. Then Elliot suddenly knocked on their door, saying that he needed to go out on business. They began to talk about dividing the reward, but then their conversation was interrupted by Ibis, who appeared in the doorway. It turned out that, since he had no choice, he signed a contract with Elliot for 60 million. Since they were now official partners, Elliot told Ibis that the winter troll was sent by the Kanya Guild. He also revealed that the test gate was a trap, and they had tricked them. But the only evidence against the guild in this case was Elliot's testimony, but it could refute him. But the man said he could somehow manipulate public opinion to damage Kanya's reputation. However, Elliot had another plan to destroy this guild. Instead of depriving them of their dominant position, they could have completely erased them from the map of the Maple World. After all, Elliot knew that the Dark Magician's followers would soon make their move. A little later, they went to negotiate with the Kanya Guild, where they intimidated their leader. Ibis said that Elliot and his squad are officially in partnership with the Gapor Guild, and if they try to harm them, they will have to deal with the entire guild. Now they were assigned security, which followed the heroes everywhere. Ralph highly praised Elliot for getting such a good deal. Suddenly he asked Debo how he managed to defeat the ice giant, because such power cannot be explained by one new circle. Kiri confirmed the man's words and said that the situation with the Hob was the same. Debo replied that he often had dreams, but he didn't remember anything from them. He only knows that a strange woman always appeared there and they fought together. Elliot was very surprised when he heard this, because he understood who they were talking about. He thought that in the trance, the power from his past life was returning to him. But this was impossible only if, by his return, he distorted the future that was bound to happen. Ralph also said that Elliot himself was unusual too, while Lady Kiri was a rather mediocre warrior. Although she was an excellent warrior, there was nothing special about her. Ralph said that the girl would be better off if she returned to her squad now. Then she went to check on the Sinus squad, of which she had previously been a member. They had already heard rumors that she wanted to join a team of other adventurers. She told her teacher that she wanted to leave the squad, and he allowed her only on one condition. He told the girl to come once every 3 weeks and personally report to him what was happening. He also reminded that Kiri will always belong to the Order of Sinus. While Ralph had reservations about Kiri's skills, Elliot had similar questions for him. The guy said that he was disappointed in him, because he sent him to the 2nd floor because he believed that he would easily pass it. And in the end, if it weren't for Debo, they would have died in the snowy desert. Ralph began to object, saying that the snow monster was too strong, so that even Elliot could not defeat it alone. He had originally planned it that way, but the level of the assassins sent by Kanya was higher, so he had to change the plan. Elliot told his squad that they needed to become stronger at all costs, and to do this, he will personally take on their training. Meanwhile, the long-haired man began to collect information about the Gapor Guild and Elliot himself. Meanwhile, the entire squad began training. Ralph fought Elliot himself, who easily matched him. He said that if he even touched him, they would be done for the day. Debo, on the other hand, practiced meditation to understand where his source of strength came from. Elliot told him to enter the trance state on his own, because if he succeeded, it would be interesting. Finally, the training was over, but Ralph looked pretty crippled. Now Debo wanted to discuss something with Elliot. He remembered the letter that had helped them escape from the second floor. The guy said it would be nice to return it, but he had no idea who to return it to. However, Elliot saw on the string that tied the letter a cross ring that reminded him of something. Seeing the strange expression on Elliot's face, Debo asked what was wrong. The guy said he had an idea and he would handle it himself. In addition, he told Debo that he would also be participating in training starting tomorrow. Lady Kiri, meanwhile, was busy chopping down trees with her sword. She was venting her rage because she really didn't know how to become stronger than she was now. Meanwhile, Elliot went out alone and walked somewhere along the deserted night streets. He walked up to one of the doors and knocked on it. A man with an unfriendly expression on his face looked out from there and asked who was bothering him. Elliot said that the postman came, showing him the letter. The boy remembered that in his past life there had been a gate destruction incident, in which the entrance to the gate had been destroyed. The guild associated with him went to investigate the incident, but the culprit was never found. Moreover, later the gate reappeared near its location and was never destroyed again. Much later, Elliot realized who was behind this and what their reasons were. He walked inside the door, knocked on it, and saw several people standing in the shadows. They were Crusader hunters. It was an organization that knew the gate was a trap, and they were the ones who deliberately destroyed it. It was a great sacrifice that remained forever unrecognized. Now Elliot came to them, saying that he would like to return something they had lost. But the people had only just begun the countdown before they were about to attack him. To prevent them from killing him, he threatened that if he died, the location of their leader would be revealed. A blonde girl emerged from the darkness, asking who he even was. But Elliot merely greeted her, calling the girl Cheryl. It turns out that they were friends in a past life. Cheryl joined the resistance when the Crusaders were gone, and they fought side by side many times. But in the end, she sacrificed herself. Now Elliot has come to them to fix it. He also brought them a palm in a box, saying that he had found it at the Kanya Guild. The girl began to object, because she did not understand anything. But Elliot told her to look first. Suddenly she saw on her palm the mark of the Black Magician's followers. This meant that there were definitely some followers in this guild. Now she asked Elliot what he wanted. The guy replied that he needed information. He had a plan, for which he and his entire detachment went to the port. Ibis said he had found some interesting gates, and it was time for them to get to work. But Elliot remained silent at the man's offer, and he thought that the boy was scared, having gone so far. However, the hero replied that he had already chosen where he would go, and it was Eagle Eye's grave. Ibis was amazed by the guy's answer, because this place was very dangerous. Kieran is a Nautilus captain who commanded countless pirates, and once had one apprentice nicknamed Eagle Eye. The Eagle's Eye Gate, where she died, became a tomb in her honor. So many explorers failed to cope with this gate that it was literally declared impossible to clear. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Lord Rakal entering. It turned out that he had come there to give Elliot 2 phoenix feathers. When giving them to him, the Lord said that he expected a good result. To prepare for battle, Elliot ordered new equipment for the entire squad. It turned out that these clothes were made from the skin of a snow animal. Meanwhile, one of Lady Miner's warriors was returning from the battle. She just cleared a 200-person orange gate and returned unharmed. Now she wanted to avenge her sister Eagle Eye, but the captain did not allow her to go there. The upset girl came to the tavern, but suddenly a man burst in, saying that some people took away the hunting permit in the Eagle Eye's tomb. Suddenly, Elliot's squad appeared in full force in the tavern. The girl immediately attacked the heroes, saying that it was she who planned to clear the gate. But Elliot only replied that in that case it was necessary to act faster. Lady Miner said that people who don't play pirates can't take away a Nautilus permit, to which Debo objected, saying that they were Ibero pirates. The enraged girl replied that one cannot just call oneself a pirate for no apparent reason. Here, another pirate intervened in the conversation, saying that if the only pirate on their team was the captain, then all the others were not pirates. The man who approached introduced himself as Murat and asked Elliot what his name was. As soon as the guy said his name, everyone around him started whispering, because he was already known as a survivor of the Gate of 100 People. Murat said that since they had already received a request, why don't they give the remaining 65 spots in the raid to another team? Elliot agreed to this, but demanded 10,000 coins for each person. That same evening, Miner was already counting the money, without asking permission from her captain this time. It turned out that Elliot had a reason for allocating only 10 places. He had a goal. It turned out that he came here to prevent the death of Captain Kieran's second student, Miner. After all, in his past life, having lost her second student, Kieran went into shock and isolated herself from the world. After this, the followers of the Black Magician managed to completely defeat the pirates of the Nautilus. One evening, someone knocked on his cabin door. It was Captain Kieran and Murat who wanted to see him. Suddenly, they asked Elliot if he was a follower of the Black Magician, which shocked him. After all, in her past life, Kieran didn't know about the Black Magician's followers, which means the future has changed. The guy hesitated a little from surprise, but nevertheless answered that he had no connection with them, to which the woman asked him to prove that he was not one of them. But Elliot objected, saying that they already knew what kind of relationship he had with the Black Magician's followers, otherwise they would have shot him long ago. Kieran replied that the followers of this Kanya trading guild were their enemies, and Elliot was also their enemy, but that didn't mean he was their ally at all. Then Elliot asked why she came here and what they wanted from him. Kieran said that she knew that the Dark Mage's followers were behind Eagle Eye's death, and she couldn't trust anyone except Murat and a few other people. The woman was afraid that they would act again and quite possibly target Minor. And if she dies, then she, the Nautilus, will be mired in chaos, and even she will not be able to endure it. So she came to Elliot and offered him a deal. As a reward for being able to protect Minor in the tomb of Eagle Eye, he will be given items from the Nautilus's treasury. The next day, the raid headed to Eagle's Eye Gate. Once inside, they found themselves in a cave where dinosaurs walked. But the first monster he encountered turned out to be only a child, and behind him was a huge adult. A massacre immediately began, in which the entire raid took part, including 10 additional people. The warrior shouted to the others not to be afraid, because they had passed the gates for 200 people. Minor took out several of the huge monsters with her shots, saying that she would handle this. Suddenly, out of nowhere, another dinosaur emerged. It turned out that Elliot said that he had his own business here, and left at the very beginning of the battle. The rest had no choice but to fight the monsters. Shortly before the battle, Elliot said that they would now fight as a team. He devised a battle plan in which Debo would wedge himself into the enemy lines and destroy them. It wasn't necessary to kill the monsters in one hit. He needed to focus on inflicting wounds. But his main task was to move only forward, no matter what happened. At the same time, ignore the attacks of monsters from behind. After all, Ralph will be covering his rear. Now Ralph acted as Debo's shield in all battles. He had to protect him at any cost. This tactic was quite successful, and the heroes were able to resist the monster. Elliot went on to say that Kiri would have the most important role. After all, she had a skill that left burns, and monsters were not very good at dealing with them. She had to finish off those who were badly battered by the others. Moreover, she had to do this with one blow. Working together, they took down all the dinosaurs without much difficulty. However, it only seemed that way to them, because new monsters immediately appeared. Suddenly, a strange detachment headed towards the gate where the heroes had entered, wanting to go inside. Some guy was yelling that there was an emergency that needed to be reported to Minor. Meanwhile, the girl and her squad also killed monsters. After successfully killing the monster, one of her companions was collecting stones when she was suddenly pierced by a fiery arrow. Other arrows appeared, which the girls tried to dodge. Minor managed to knock the arrow's trajectory off course with her shot. Looking back, the girl saw the man who had shot at her, but suddenly several more shots were heard from there. It turned out that it was Elliot himself who shot at their squad. Saying that this was a cleanup, he ordered the soldiers not to move, saying that he would finish this quickly. Meanwhile, one of the members of Elliot's squad found the second gate to the dungeon, and suddenly a snail appeared on his shoulder. He was very scared of it. He asked the animal why it came to him. Distracted from the animal, he accidentally entered the second gate. Meanwhile, Minor did not understand Elliot's actions at all and asked for an explanation, but he only shot at them again. Suddenly, the squad that had recently entered the gate appeared, saying that they had arrived just in time. The white-haired guy explained to Minor that it seemed like this Elliot did exactly the same thing during the 100th gate. Kieran guessed his nature and sent them to help. While running away, Elliot fired and hit several members of the newly arrived squad. But since there were more of them, they surrounded him. Now Minor herself joined the fight, saying that he would not be able to escape now. To get away from them, he used telekinesis to bring down a huge boulder. Suddenly, one of the grenades thrown by someone from the squad exploded. There was a collapse that separated Minor from the rest of the squad. Now she stood face to face with Elliot. She told the guy to immediately say what he had in mind, but he only asked whether she was ready to take responsibility for her actions. Suddenly, the rubble was destroyed by a fiery arrow that flew out. Suddenly, the commander of the newly arrived detachment was pierced by Minor's bullets. The others were shocked to see the girl's actions and did not understand what was happening. But the girl only told one of them to take away all the newly arrived warriors, because this was Kieran's order. Meanwhile, the man from Elliot's squad found himself on the second floor of the dungeon, where there were corpses all around. He saw a man there and hurried to meet him. but suddenly a snail that came after him knocked him off his feet. But it was too late, because he had attracted the attention of the terrible monster, which was now standing right in front of him. It turned out that when they came face to face, Elliot asked Minor if she knew anything about her sister's death. He told her that she was killed by those who had now come for her. Kieran knew about all of this, and that was why Elliot was here. After all, now the traitors were hunting for her. It began to dawn on the girl that the Black Magician's followers were now on the Nautilus ship, and that her sister's killers were her comrades. To prove his words, Elliot showed the girl the medallion that Kieran had given him. Minor believed the guy, because she knew that the captain would not have given this medallion to just anyone. She asked Elliot how one could identify the followers of a Black Magician. This is precisely why he brought the clairvoyance glasses, which helped him see the flows of mana. He told Minor that everyone except the first 3 were followers of the Black Magician. One of them immediately objected, telling Minor not to believe such baseless statements. With the help of his glasses, Elliot could see the tattoos of the Black Magician's followers that each traitor had. He poured mana into one of the tattoos that appeared on the warrior's forehead. There was no point in them hiding now, and they opened fire on Elliot and Minor. This fight was difficult for Elliot, as he spent too much mana searching for followers. Therefore, he suggested that the girl go through the second gate, which was very close. But she refused, saying that she would kill each of them with her own hands. Suddenly, one of the traitors pulled out a huge magic grenade. A magical fog began to emerge from it, spreading around. It was an illusion that made it impossible to see anything around. Suddenly, someone from the fog began to attack Minor. No one could help her, because the rest of her squad were also blinded. Suddenly, one of the bullets approached the girl's face, ready to pierce her. But Elliot managed to push the girl away, and the bullet flew past. Now the entire squad of traitors attacked them with firearms. But Elliot was able to defend himself with a stone block that he pulled out using telekinesis. And with the next attack, he destroyed most of the Black Magician's followers with a fire arrow. He created an enhanced fire arrow which he aimed straight at the traitor guns. And the next second, while they were distracted, Elliot went into close combat. Finally, he destroyed the fog-emitting grenade and the smoke screen cleared. But suddenly one of the Black Magician's followers created magic mines. There were a huge number of them, and they surrounded the heroes everywhere. The next second, they all exploded, scattering fragments in their path. The heroes were thrown in different directions with terrible force, but Elliot saved some of them by controlling the stone block with telekinesis. He wanted to get to the second gate before his mana ran out. Suddenly, one of the traitors approached Minor. He managed to push the girl off the flying boulder. Elliot attempted to restrain Minor using telekinesis. But suddenly, out of nowhere, another follower of the Black Magician appeared and threw a grenade at him. It exploded with terrible force right on the boulder, and everything around was scattered. Minor woke up to find that the second gate had been destroyed. However, they should soon be restored somewhere nearby. In the meantime, the battle against the followers of the Black Magician continued here. One of the traitors attacked Minor with his powerful fist, but she managed to dodge it. It turned out that they were hiding their real skills to mislead her. But despite this, Minor managed to get close to the man from behind. She immediately shot at him with 2 pistols at once, but only hit him in the leg. The battle continued until the traitor revealed himself, at which point Minor shot him straight in the stomach. Her next shot was aimed at the head and was fatal. To save time, Minor told them to attack all at once. Meanwhile, Debo and Kiri found themselves in a strange place where there were many gates. Ralph said he had heard about this special gate, and it must be connected to other places. All 3 of them passed through one gate. As they entered the dungeon, they saw a man running straight towards them. It was Iburo, who was escaping from the terrible monster with all his might. One of the pirates noticed that these monsters were dressed in the clothes of their comrades who had died long ago in this place. But now was not the time to think, because these monsters did not die, even if you shot them in the head. Even Elliot was shocked, having never heard of such creatures. With his glasses, he saw that these monsters had no core, and all the threads of mana connecting them stretched into the wall. Suddenly he asked Debo if everyone had entered the gate. But the next second he grabbed his eye in pain, because he no longer had mana to maintain the clairvoyance skill. Suddenly, Minor appeared from behind the wall and destroyed the monsters with her bullets. To the delight of the rest of the squad, the girl was not wounded. She pointed her pistols at the monsters in a rage. The next second, there was a powerful explosion, creating a shockwave around itself. It turned out that with her shot, the girl created a whole opening in the wall. Elliot knew he needed his skill now more than ever, so he made brightly glowing balls. Meanwhile, Debo fought the monsters. It was very difficult, because they did not die even if their heads were cut off. Suddenly, one of them grabbed the guy tightly by the neck, but Ralph covered him, throwing the zombie away with a powerful blow. He told the guy to stop grumbling, and instead of thinking about it, he would be better off hurting a couple more monsters. Suddenly something huge burst through the ground. It was a giant, vile monster with eggs sticking out of its body. It was becoming more and more difficult to hold back the onslaught of the monsters. After taking the strange pills, Elliot's heart was beating very hard, but he had no choice. He had once been in a situation where the monsters were getting stronger, but there was not enough attack power, and when he reached the 6th level limit, he had to look for new methods. Then he tried to absorb magic stones, which were only used to level up. In theory, they should restore mana, but the hero only has to cope with the raging flow inside. It was necessary to direct the flow to the heart through the blood vessels. Luckily, he succeeded, and a huge fire blast swept away half of the monsters in front of the hero. However, Elliot's appearance had changed, and now he inspired fear even in his comrades. Meanwhile, Lady Kiri continued to confront the undying zombies. Suddenly, one of the monsters hit Ralph and mushrooms began to grow on his hand. In horror, the man cut off his own hand to prevent the infection from spreading. He realized that if he became infected with this, he would become like these zombies. Debo realized that the others were starting to move slower, and that if things continued like this, they would all be destroyed, so he himself rushed into battle. With his axe at the ready, he made a dash straight towards the huge mushroom. However, he pushed it away from himself with his long tongue. He was saved from another blow by the monster by some girl who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Miner and Elliot focused on breaking through the wall. The guy focused on aiming accurately, and the girl had to shoot. The bullet, enhanced by Elliot's telekinesis, headed straight for the mountain. The hero added a twisted fire arrow to the shot, and the result was a powerful charge. But the Miner squad members ran out of ammo, and there was no one left to cover the heroes. The zombies rushed at them, attacking from behind. Elliot wanted to get to the true essence of these immortal monsters. After all, he understood that the owner of their shared life energy was hiding somewhere behind the wall. Finally, the bullet broke through the rock and they were able to see the real monster. The missile strike blew it to pieces, and a crystal of life energy fell out of it. Suddenly it split, flying into small pieces. Immediately, all the monsters began to self-destruct. Elliot finally took off his mana-draining glasses, saying that this level was past. Now, Mina remembered how her parents abandoned her, selling her for money. Her sister Leia began to protect the girl and several other orphans. She was a real heroine for the girl, so they went to study with Kieran together. Leia was doing better, and Miner felt like she was starting to drift away from her. But she, smiling, replied that the younger one still had everything ahead of her, and she would always be by her side. Now, after the battle, the entire squad checked their health and remaining mana. Suddenly they noticed something in the corner. Tied to a boulder, there sat Miner's older sister. It turned out that she tied herself up with ropes to avoid turning into a zombie mushroom. The heroes also found a letter on her. It was addressed to Kieran, and it said that the Black Magician's followers had returned and infiltrated the Nautilus. She asked the captain to be careful, because many of his comrades turned out to be traitors. In addition, there she said goodbye to Miner, telling her to forgive her, because she could not keep her promise and return. Meanwhile, a group of followers of the Black Magician were waiting for the heroes at the exit of the gate. Suddenly one of them was pierced by a fiery arrow, and the next second, a hail of bullets rained down on them. It turned out that it was Kieran herself who came here to cover her people. Now she sat at the gate, guarding it and waiting for the heroes to appear. A little later, Miner emerged from the portal, holding her sister's corpse in her arms. Kieran saw the surviving girl and tears welled up in her eyes. Now they could bury Eagle Eye properly. All the important people of the Nautilus gathered for the funeral of the brave warrior. Almost everyone was here, but Elliot had disappeared again. It turned out that he and Kieran had agreed on something. After drinking several mana potions, Elliot set out to find all the followers aboard the Nautilus. Meanwhile, Miner's friend came to ask her about something. It turned out that Elliot invited the girl to join their group. The guy said that if she joined him, she would find herself on the front lines of the fight against the followers of the Black Magician. So he let her go, saying that he would stay here to protect the Nautilus. Now the girl sighed with relief, because she had long thought about what adventures awaited her in the future with Elliot.